Calvary Chapel presents Pastor's Perspective, a one-hour program that gives a biblical and pastoral viewpoint on the theological, social, and practical issues of the day. We'll be taking your calls in just a moment. But first, here's today's host.
Well, hi, everybody, and welcome to the Tuesday edition of Pastor's Perspective. Yes, it's Terrific Tuesday. I'm Don Stewart with Pastor Brian Broderson, taking your calls and questions today, toll-free across the good old USA on what we believe as Christians, why we are Christians, and how a person's supposed to live the Christian life. And if you have questions on those subjects today, we'd love to hear from you. Toll-free, 1-888-564-6173, 1-888-564-6173 if you want to call. And if you want to watch the program live and in color, have a device that gets the internet, you can watch us on his channel or www.kwve.com, where the live webcast is presently going on. Brian, welcome to Terrific Tuesday.
Don, it's terrific.
It is terrific, isn't it? Yeah, it's always good to be here, isn't it?
Always good.
Yeah, a couple things. Before, about your announcements, I heard some great things happen at the baptism on Saturday.
We had just a fantastic time. Yeah. You know, these baptisms never cease to amaze me because we have been doing these baptisms, as you well know, Don, for over 40 years.
I know.
There at Pirates Cove, and to see the crowd still come out,
amazing. It
just always stuns me. I think, wow, it was wonderful. We baptized a ton of people. The highlight for me the day was to actually lead a lady in the sinner's prayer and then baptize her there.
Isn't that great?
So it was precious. It was a great time. Yeah,
can't beat that. All right, so that's the last one of the season, right?
Last one, the last beach baptism.
Now you're going to do some ones at the church again? You think?
We'll probably do
pool
that.
Ones.
And I had a couple of ladies come up after service on Sunday saying, "No, we can't wait to get baptized tomorrow." I said, "Well, actually, the baptism was yesterday, so they missed it by 2 days. So we'll have to. We'll have to make something happen for them."
Okay, good. All right, we got a conference coming up. Church planting. What's going on there?
Yeah, next Monday and Tuesday, right here on the grounds of Calvary Chapel, Costa Mesa, we're going to be having the Re-Engage Church Planting Conference, and this is put on through Calvary Church Planting Network, and these guys are based up in Camarillo, California. Bruce Zachary is the director of the Calvary Church Planting Network, and so we're having some guys out. We're going to talk about church planting. I think we had a couple of hundred guys signed up, so we're excited about that. And, Don, that's really what we've been doing for the past 40-plus years. We've just been planting churches all over the world. Indeed. And so it's a passion of ours. We are becoming a little bit more proactive in the sense of, intentionally preparing and sending people out. We've planted tons of churches, almost in some ways unintentionally. So I've often thought, well, if we could plant near to 1,500 churches unintentionally, what could we do if we actually
tried to do it?
So. Yeah, so the conference is coming up on Monday and Tuesday of next week. That's the 29th and the 30th of the month. And I'm going to be there speaking. Tom Stipe's coming out from Denver. Jonathan Domingo's coming up from he's coming up from Ensenada. Yes. And Skip's coming over from Albuquerque. He's going to be with us. Skip Heitzig, Lloyd Pulley coming out from the East Coast. Yeah, from New Jersey.
What a good group.
Bruce Zachary will be there. And then we've got workshops with the lovely Cheryl Broderson.
Right.
She's going to do talking about the pastor's wife, the church planting pastor's wife. She did that with me a few times, so she's got a lot of great insight. And a number of other speakers, so it's going to be a great time. And I just wanted to throw it out. If you're out there within the range of our voice and you are thinking about planting a church, maybe you're an assistant pastor at a church somewhere now, maybe you're involved in some kind of ministry and you're feeling like God is leading you out eventually to start something in a new location, this would be the conference for you. It's $99 for the 2 days, and so you can get signed up for that if you want to go to reengage.ccpnetwork.org, reengage.ccpnetwork.org. You can find out all the details there for that.
So anybody who's interested in church planting is allowed to attend, is that right?
Yeah.
If they pay the $99.
Yeah, if they pay the $99.
Okay, good. Interesting.
Yeah, and then, I just did an ad, kind of an advertisement for another conference that's coming up in October. This is a Nuts and Bolts conference, they're calling it. And John Miller out at Revival in Menifee is putting this on. Skip and John are kind of doing this together. This is a great conference. It's a conference on expositional teaching and preaching.
Good.
So, and Don, we are strong proponents of expositional teaching. That's doing what we do. We take books of the Bible and we work through them. We explain the text, and that's really the biblical pattern. So those guys are going to be doing that. That's October 20th and 21st.
Great.
And I'm going to be actually in New England, not Old England.
Not the old one, the new one.
I'm usually in Old England, but I'm going to be in New England during those days, or I would be at the conference because it sounds like it's going to be a great conference. Yeah. And actually, you can, if you're interested in that, guys, you can sign up for that at, I think it's expositorypreaching.org, I think is the website.
Expositorypreaching.org.
Yeah,
don't quote you on
don't
that.
Quote
Well, you can go to there and see
check.
see what's there. Okay. As you're checking, we also have the prayer night for Pastor Saeed coming up too.
Yeah, that's this Friday night. And so we've got a worldwide, we're going to be part of a worldwide prayer event for Saeed and others who are persecuted for their faith. Yeah. We're going to be gathering together. Actually, our ladies, after the women's study on Friday morning, they're going to do a noon to 1 prayer time.
Great.
And then we're going to reconvene at 7 on Friday evening, and we're going to spend a good hour in prayer together, just calling out to the Lord for deliverance for Saeed, and for so many Christians are suffering persecution these days. It's becoming quite common, especially in the Islamic world. We're seeing these crazy things that are happening. We're going to be seeking the Lord on that.
That's good. All right. So this Friday night, praying for Pastor Saeed, the Church Planting Conference next Monday and Tuesday. And then again, this Re-Engage, the Nuts and the Bolts coming up.
Re-Engage is the church planting next week. And
that's
then,
next week.
In
Okay.
October.
The Nuts and the Bolts in
Nuts
October.
and the
Okay.
Bolts, yeah.
All right. Got it. Good. All right. Wow. A lot going on.
Yeah, a lot happening.
Never, ever a dull moment. Okay. So, good.
So, give us a little news update here.
Well, this is strange. All right. We've been told recently the greatest threat now seems to Western civilization the past 1,000 years is the Islamic State. All right. And our president said he's going to do something about it. They're going to get engaged with a number of Arab countries and deal with them. Forgetting Iran, of course, is developing a nuclear bomb to blow up Israel, then us next. But they're not the big threat now. In fact, we're working with them. And so our president came today to the podium, and he talked about the bombing overnight in the country of Syria. Now, remember, Syria, we're supposed to remove its leader, but we got his okay to do it now, Bashar Assad. And who do we bomb? Is it Al-Qaeda? Is it ISIS? No, it's some group called the Khorasans that no one's ever heard of until the last couple of weeks, that are supposedly some type of offshoot of Al-Qaeda. And they were planning, I guess, these terrorist attacks on America, on England, on, the UK, on Europe and that. And so out of the blue, a group that was only mentioned for the first time last week needed this assault happen. Now, I tell you what's weird, Brian. When I first heard this, I thought that the guy said President Obama is going to bomb the Kardashians, not the Khorasans. And I thought, now, why in the world we want to do something like that? But so it turns out to be the Khorasans, So anyway, and so it's funny that Drudge's headline is "Keeping Up with the Khorasans." So but anyway, bottom line is that here we got another group. Now, how can you tell all these players without a scorecard? You've got Hezbollah, the Party of God in southern Lebanon. You've got Hamas there in the Gaza Strip. You've got the Khorasans now in Syria. You've got Al-Qaeda, of course, still around. And then, of course, the greatest threat is IS, the Islamic State. So they're all 5 unique, separate, different groups with all similar goals in mind. So it's interesting, isn't it, to see this happen? So that was the big news day. There's actually some overnight bombing in their command and control headquarters that supposedly stopped any type of terrorist threat that would happen either in Europe, the UK, or here in the U.S. So that's kind of the latest.
Yeah. Boy, it's interesting, though, listening to some of these mandates that are being put out by the Islamic State leaders. They're just really commissioning people all around the world to commit mass murder.
Indeed.
Just go out and kill as many Westerners as you possibly can.
Yep.
It's done. I mean, when you think about it, Islam is a religion that, promotes murder.
Of course they do.
The murder of innocent people, just people who don't agree with or submit to Islam. And, anybody today who who tries to make any kind of a comparison between Christianity and Islam. And, so the radical liberals, they're always saying, oh, well, the extremists are the same regardless of what religion it is, and Christian extremists are just like Islamic extremists. This is just nonsense. And I was glad to see that an unlikely figure stood up in defense of that was Bill Maher. When
exactly.
He came against Charlie Rose and said, no, don't try to tell me. He said, look, part of his illustration, he said, look, for lack of a better illustration, the Vatican is the center for Christianity in the world. He said, are they beheading anybody at the Vatican? Are they? I haven't heard of any of that, But it's so true. I listened to a really excellent little piece the other night. I think it was originated probably from the Desiring God website, which is a John Piper website. But it was an interview with a man who is a former Quranic scholar, former Muslim, Saudi Arabian, who's a believer now. And they were asking him now, okay, so we hear that the Islamic State people and their behavior and all that, we hear that some people say that this is a hijacking of Islam. Others say that no, this is really more of a true Islam. And this guy gave just such a brilliant answer. And he went in and, you know this and I know this, but I don't know how many of our listeners know that the Quran is divided between the Meccan surahs and the Medina surahs. And the Meccan surahs were, these were supposedly, the revelation that Muhammad got, but at this point he had no power. Right. He had to just kind of go out and try to talk people into, believing in his religion. He didn't do too well with that. But when he fled Mecca and he went to Medina, that's where he gained power. He gained military power. And then he started, his raiding and his mass converting by the sword. And then, of course, there's these Medinan surahs. And these are the ones that are the ones that, kill the infidel, hunt them down wherever you can, kill the Jews, the Christians, all of this crazy stuff. And so this guy, who's a Saudi Arabian, former Muslim himself, a Quranic scholar, he says, look, however you slice it, he said, ISIS is this is the true Islam. Yes. He said that everybody who says no, Islam is peaceful and so forth. He said, certainly there are millions and millions of peaceful Muslims. Indeed. But it's because they're not taking their text seriously. Yep. If they took it seriously, like the Islamic State guys are, they would be doing the kinds of things that the Islamic State is doing, because that's what their holy text tells them to do. I read a book years ago, Don, by somebody who, you're familiar with Karen Armstrong. Oh, yes. And, Karen's not in any way an Orthodox believer, but she wrote a book on Islam. And it's interesting because in the first part of the book, she gives a history of Islam. And she starts with Muhammad, and then she just comes kind of right down to this very day, just looking at the leaders. Yep. And it is a history of bloodshed. It's a history of murder. It's a history of one leader in rivalry with another leader and killing one another off. I mean, that's really been the history of the religion itself in the top leadership, and that's why we have the Shias, that's why we have the Sunnis, that's why we have them killing each other, because they're all against one another, really. And it's been a religion of bloodshed from its inception, really.
It has. In fact, there's an article in the Jerusalem Post by an Islamic scholar who's trying to provide a peaceful theology for Islam, and he says we're trying to put that together, but the top 25 Islamic scholars in the world, when asked about it, they said, no, that's not possible, because that's not their history. Yeah. And he's trying something against the grain here to do it. And he's talking about if a young Muslim wants to become more religious, will he become more peaceful and obedient to Allah? Well, no. If he follows the history of the Quran, he's going to be just the opposite. He's going to take people's lives. And he said that's the sad answer, but that's the truth.
That's the truth, yeah. And the pathetic thing, really, in our situation, in our culture, is for whatever twisted reason, the liberal mind is very twisted, in my opinion, but for whatever twisted reason, the facts, they just don't want to acknowledge the facts. Yep. I mean, it's staring you in the face, with a sword, with a knife.
Yeah. Isn't it interesting that our president, when he talked about going after ISIS, the first thing he said, this is not Islam. Yeah. ISIS is not Islam, or IS is not Islam. Yeah. And John Kerry said the week before, IS has hijacked a peaceful religion.
Yeah, right. Yeah. I think it would be better to say, Because, like we both acknowledge, there are millions of peaceful Muslims. You know Muslims, I know Muslims, and I have good friendships with Muslim people. But, I think it would be better to say this is a form of Islam. Don't say it's not Islam. That's absurd. I mean, go tell those guys they're not real Muslims. I mean, they'll show you that they're real Muslims real quick. The mullahs, the ayatollahs. These guys are it.
That's it.
They are the Muslims.
They are the Muslims. Yeah.
And so I think to correctly state it, if you don't want to lump everybody together, fine, that's understandable. We shouldn't do that, but you need to say this is a form of Islam.
Indeed it is. Yeah. And so we have to understand that. But what's interesting, again, we'll go to the phones in a second. You've got this new group, the Khorasans. I'm going to want to say the Kardashians. The Khorasans, you've got, ISIS, IS, you've got Al-Qaeda, you've got Hamas, you've got Hezbollah. And so how can the people tell them without a scorecard, the players, because they've all got different goals in mind, which is interesting. Individual. I mean, they want to control themselves, but they're all going their own direction. Interesting.
Yeah. World, they want world domination, and then between themselves they fight it out to see who gets
could be the top dog there. Yeah. Anyway, we'll keep our eye on that because we haven't heard of the Khorassans until today, but evidently they were the worst threat ever now, and they were going to plan some terroristic attempts here, not only in the U.S. but in Europe and in England both. So that was stopped by the bombing last night. It seems their command and control center in Syria was taken out. All right, to the phones we go here on Terrific Tuesday. And here's a great question from Anaheim Hills, California to start us off. Thomas, welcome to Pastor's Perspective. Hi.
Hey, Pastor. Thanks for taking my call.
You are welcome.
Okay, so let me give you a little background to my question.
Sure.
Okay, I know I have a friend, Facebook friend. He was devout. He went to Calvary Chapel devoutly for years, and now he's part of the Greek Orthodox Church, and he just got his doctorate in theology.
Okay.
So he's very learned, very brilliant. And then, so I'm calling because every time I post something on Facebook for anything to do with biblical, for example, I posted the other day saying I can relate with Paul, saying what a wretched man I am. And then he came in there saying, hey, I hate to disagree with you, but everything's wrong. Calvary Chapel's a sect. Everything you learn from them, the way that they teach, the last 50 years they changed what was historical Christianity for 1900 years. And I hope you know where I'm going with this.
Yeah, Thomas, it's called unfriending somebody like that on Facebook when they do that sort of thing on your site. You can do that, because this doesn't sound very edifying what this person continues to do.
I understand. At the same time, he doesn't attack me personally. He just says that he wants me to get my theology right.
Well, okay. Let's talk about that, Brian. We've seen things like this before. Greek Orthodox, people lead Calvary, Roman Catholic, name it. Okay, what do you say?
Well, look, the Greek Orthodox Church or the Orthodox Church, whatever country it's in, it identifies with the nation, but. Of course, they've been around for centuries, and just like the Roman Catholic Church, they had the big split in 1066, I think it was, or something around there. And they claim, of course, to be the true church. The Roman Catholic Church claims to be the true church. They claim to be the true church, so there's a dispute there. And yet we're simply basing what we believe on the Scriptures, and we believe that is the only real basis for the Christian faith, the biblical text itself. So we're doing our best to understand the biblical text and to live it and to apply it and so forth. And if that's wrong in their eyes, well, I'm not surprised by that. The Orthodox Church has had a history of persecuting true believers. and even today in places like Russia, the Russian Orthodox Church would generally be probably more opposed to evangelical Christians than even the secular government.
It's amazing, isn't it?
Yeah. But the Orthodox Church it's just a religion, really, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
I mean, it's like, when I was growing up in Roman Catholicism, I was part of a religion. There was a place of worship and a place where you went and you did your religious duty, and that was, as long as you did that was fine. And then you went about your life. I never heard about the necessity of being born again. I never heard of the idea that my sins could be forgiven and I could have assurance of heaven. I never heard of the idea that you could know God personally and have him lead your life. And that was as a Roman Catholic. Well, guess what? If you're Orthodox, you got the same situation.
Yep.
It's very, very similar with few distinctions. One has a pope, the other has a patriarch. One emphasizes Mary more than the other. Both of them emphasize, especially with the Orthodox, the icons are huge, the saints are huge. So it's a religion. And anybody who leaves biblical Christianity, whether it's Calvary Chapel or any other manifestation of biblical Christianity, and goes to Orthodoxy or to Roman Catholicism or something like that, I think that's a huge turn in the wrong direction.
Yeah, and they always seem to be angry at us, and they spend all their time going after us. I always wondered, Brian, people like this that have supposedly now found the truth, why aren't they out preaching the gospel to the whole world, doing the Great Commission? Why do they seem to want to pick on us all the time? And I don't get it.
Yeah, but Don, I mean, do they even have any concept of preaching the gospel?
No, not that I know of.
Yeah. I mean, I never, before I was saved, I never thought, you preach the gospel. What would I do that for? That's, I guess the priest did that, but I didn't know anything about it.
Yeah. So, Thomas, I think you're I would pray for your friend, but I wouldn't have him on your Facebook page at all if you're trying to do something edifying, because you got people reading this, and this person's only going to confuse folks, and it sounds like he's a very confused person too. I could care less if the person goes to seminary, get their doctorate in a certain area. The Bible's very clear on what we're supposed to do, how we're supposed to behave, and again, there are practices there, like again with the icons. Now, Roman Catholics have the three-dimensional images. The icons are flat. That's one of the big problems in Greek Orthodox. Just the pictures there, the icons, the images. And a few different views with the work of the Holy Spirit. But apart from that, they're pretty much the same, except for the patriarch versus the pope.
Right, yeah. I mean, they're very, very similar. And they're, as we've commented, there's no emphasis on the Bible. There's no emphasis on a personal relationship with Jesus. There's no proclamation of the necessity of the new birth and justification by faith. And all those things you find in the Bible.
Exactly.
They're not there really, or if they're there, they're hidden under layers and layers of tradition and ritual.
The key is to read the first-hand documents, the New Testament, and follow it. That's what we're trying to do. Church history, tradition, and that can really, really throw you off. And so, Thomas, again, word of the wise, I would just, unfriend this person and, pray for him. But it doesn't sound like you can really do anything. He seems to know it all, so it's hard dealing with people like that. I don't think there's anything you could tell him that would change his mind. All right, Adam from Needles, California, which is usually pretty hot. Adam, hi. Welcome to Pastor's Perspective.
Hi, how are you guys doing?
We are wonderful today.
Thank you. I was actually calling, like the previous, like Thomas said, I want to give you a little background. I'm actually a biologist. And,
okay.
I have a background in evolutionary biology.
Okay.
But I was also raised in the church, and I have a strong relationship with the God, and I'm a strong believer. And I read a book called The Language of God that did a great job of basically trying to make a mutual relationship between, evolution and being a believer, and basically just saying it's God's design. I mean, it really improved and strengthened my belief just by being able to see, his work out in the field and in my work. And I was wondering, from a pastor's point of view, how do I go about basically? I just want to know actually what you think. How do you deal with the people that call in about that situation?
About theistic evolution. Okay, Brian, you first. What do you say?
Who are we talking to here? Adam. Okay.
Yep.
Well, Adam, theistic evolution. Now, we have to define what we're talking about when we're talking about evolution. Yep. We're talking about microevolution. We're talking about changes within a kind. Then, of course, we believe that. We see that. Everybody realizes that's the case. If we're talking about macroevolution, if we're talking about everything that came into origination through natural processes, you see, somebody like Richard Dawkins, for example, he scoffs at the idea of theistic evolution because from his understanding, if evolution is true in the macro sense, then it eliminates God.
Sure does.
There is no need for God because everything came about through natural processes. So anybody who holds to a theistic evolution that would give a naturalistic view of the origins of things is severely confused. Because you've got a process. There are variations within the species or the kind, And some people look at that as microevolution. I understand that. My son-in-law is a biology professor, and, we've had many conversations about this. He's a biology professor. He's also a creationist. He believes that God created. He feels like the more you actually understand the complexity of things, the more difficult it is to believe in the evolutionary hypothesis. I was just reading today about the brain and just, that the human brain has the capacity to contain as much information as you'd find in 25 million volumes.
Whoa.
You're like, really? Now, this just happened to come into existence. So, so theistic evolution, why do we need evolution if we have a God who's a creator? The other thing, of course, is God tells us that he created everything, and he never gives us any indication whatsoever that there was any kind of an evolutionary process. So to insist that we have to insert it in because some people say it's true, I think that that's a mistake. We need to take the text for what it is. Now, one other thing I will add, and I wish I had this quote with me. I'm going to actually write it down and keep it with me permanently. And I've used it many, many times before. But it's a fantastic quote. And there's not just one of them. You can find a number of them by leading evolutionists who, in rare moments of honesty, will the well-known, and right now even his name is escaping me, but he said that there's no actual evidence for evolution. He says, but the only other alternative is creation. And then he said this. He said, for philosophical reasons, we cannot agree with creation. So there's no scientific evidence for evolution. But philosophically, he can't believe in a God, so he chooses to believe in something that there's no scientific evidence for. And this guy was a world-renowned, he won the prize, whatever. I can't. Here I am with a blank mind.
Nobel or something.
Yeah, I don't have the that mind that has 25 million volumes.
I'm just not using it all. Yeah.
It's just not working. And his name will come to me before this program is over. But so here's my point. When you have leading evolutionists saying candidly there is no real scientific evidence for evolution, why are Christians then latching onto it? I think that to me just doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, and Adam, the language of God is actually very clear. Genesis 2:7, the Lord God formed the man from the dust of the soil of the ground, breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and the man, Adam, became a living being. And Matthew 19:1-6, the Lord Jesus Christ said, have you not read that he who made them male and female in the beginning, confirming Genesis 2:7. So Jesus believed in the direct creation of Adam and Eve. Something theistic evolution says, no, we have a common ancestor with the ape, molecules to man evolution that God sort of guided. The scripture is completely against it because, among other things, you've got the problem of animal death before the fall. I mean, animals died and lived and died for millions and millions of years before God came around to let Adam, and Eve be formed. Why? Why did he do that? Because think about it this way, Adam, in the new heavens and the new earth, how long is it going to take God to create it? Instantaneously. He's going to do it. He's going to speak it. It's going to come about. So why did he need millions of years of animals killing one another until Adam and Eve came around? And again, theistic evolutionists say they're just, some type of trouser ape that was an ape that, that God chose out of the other apes and put his spirit in, and ergo there becomes humankind. It just doesn't work, Brian, does it?
No, it doesn't. And it contradicts scripture because, Paul says that Adam was the first man.
Exactly.
And Paul says that the first man was made of dust.
Yep.
He came from the dust. He did not come from a lower creature that was, evolving. And then at one point God touched him, hominid, and said, okay, now you're a human being. Now, there are Christians who do believe that. I just think that why?
Yeah, why?
Why do they believe that?
So again, Adam, if you take the Bible seriously, the language of God is actually very clear, unless God's a really bad communicator. He, from beginning to end, over 100 times, it talks about him being the creator of all things. Now, create means he made them. He just didn't, like a cosmic Henry Ford, start the ball rolling, let everything go to itself. Anyway, we're up to a break halfway through. Terrific Tuesday on Pastor's Perspective. I'm Don Stewart with Brian Broderson, taking your calls and questions. 1-888-564-6173 is a toll-free number. We'll be back in a couple of minutes. Stay right with us. All right, back with you with the second half of Terrific Tuesday here on Pastor's Perspective. I'm Don Stewart with Pastor Brian Broderson, taking your calls and questions, 1-888-564-6173. Well, Brian's using one of those 25 million files in his brain to get the answer, and he's got it for us on the quote. Brian, let's hear it.
Plus, I use my iPad.
Well, that's your brain knowing where to go, so that's the whole point.
So it was George Wald. The quote was from George Wald. He's a Harvard biochemist, very, very well-known scientist, evolutionary scientist. And this is a great quote. He said, "One is only to contemplate the magnitude of this task to concede that the spontaneous generation of a living organism is impossible. Yet we are here as a result, I believe, of spontaneous generation. When it comes to the origin of life, there are only two possibilities, creation or spontaneous generation. There is no third way. Spontaneous generation, I love this, was disproved 100 years ago, but that leads us to only one other conclusion, that of supernatural creation. Here it is. We cannot accept that on philosophical grounds. Therefore, we choose to believe the impossible, that life arose spontaneously by chance."
Yeah, and he won a Nobel Prize in 1967 in physiology. He lived all the way till April 1997 at age 91. Mm-hmm. And he was known for his work in pigments in the retina of the eye, so he had to work with the eye. Yeah. And being I can't imagine how difficult that must have been, Brian.
But you know, he's honest. He says it's philosophical.
Yeah.
It's not scientific.
Exactly, yeah.
It's philosophical. Yeah. And you know, Huxley, this is a quote that everybody, I think, knows, but Huxley said, "We didn't embrace evolution because it seemed scientifically viable. We embraced it because it gave us freedom to live the way we wanted to live."
Yeah. Yeah, and they always argue, well, someday we'll find the answers to all these questions. It's like the God of the gaps they blame us for. You know, we say God did this. Well, it's because we don't know enough about nature. Well, someday we'll figure out how all this works, this evolution stuff.
Yeah, given long enough.
Given long enough,
we'll
be
able to explain it.
It'll make sense. Well, okay. Anyway, George Wald, the Harvard professor who Nobel Prize winner, died at the age of 91, just about a decade or so ago, 15 years ago.
But going back to the question from Adam, the theistic evolution, again, there are Christians who do hold to the view, and we just would disagree with them and don't understand why they would embrace that. But again, I think we need to clarify the difference between micro and macro evolution. So if you want to call the variation in species and the changes that take place, if you want to call that evolution, then fine, you can call it that. I don't know that that's the best thing to call it, but it's certainly there. And we understand that God created each kind with this amazing variation within each kind. The dogs. I mean,
exactly.
He created two dogs, and look at all the crazy dogs that
crazy. But beings can only mate according to their kind.
Yeah.
Dogs and cats.
Well,
no crossover.
When you look at Genesis 1, and people say, well, it's not a scientific text, and no, it's not a scientific text, and thank God it's not a scientific text. We wouldn't be able to read it if it was a scientific text. But 10 times it says after its kind.
Exactly.
You think God was wanting to let us know something?
Stress a point too.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it couldn't be a scientific text, Brian, because what was scientific knowable in the first century is, we've gone on in that, and it would be out of date fairly soon or be ahead of its time. No one would figure it out to the 21st century. Yeah. So God spoke in everyday plain language, the language of the marketplace as we observe things, and it's very clear that he is the creator and the sustainer of the universe, and he made them. He didn't do it. It's not blind chance. We're here by God's design. All right, Iva from Michigan's been waiting a long time. Iva, thank you for your patience. You're on Pastor's Perspective. Hi. Hello, are you there, Iva?
Yes. Sorry about that.
Oh, no problem. Go ahead. You're on the air.
Okay. What does it mean to talk in tongues after being baptized as a child?
Okay.
How would you interpret what's being said?
Now, after being baptized as a child?
Yeah, after baptism, when I was 9 years old, I was told that I had talked in tongues, and it was like of a different language, and it seemed to be biblical, and I never knew what that meant.
I'm curious. Do you remember doing that, Iva?
Yeah.
Okay, you do remember some. Okay, and you talked in something after you were baptized, and people said she was speaking in tongues. Brian, how do you respond?
Well, the Bible definitely talks about a gift of tongues, and it's a wonderful thing. If God gives you that gift, it's a gift that is used to express praise and worship to the Lord. So if you have that gift, you should enjoy it and be blessed by it and not be ashamed of it or embarrassed about it or afraid of it. And so, I don't know. anything else?
No, it's a definite gift, Iva, that God gives today, and bless you if you've been given the gift. And again, nothing, and there's no age limit, age restriction on the gift of speaking in tongues. The Bible doesn't limit it to just adults over 30 or whatever it might be. So I guess the question she's asking, how should if she has the gift, how does she use it? How does she use it biblically? I guess would be the question.
Well, you use your gift. It's used privately. It's like a private way to communicate with the Lord. And occasionally, if you're with people, it can be used publicly. But when it's used publicly, there needs to be an interpreter so other people that are there know what's being said in their own language, so they can rejoice and be blessed with you. So if there's no interpreter in a meeting, then Paul says in his instruction on this in 1 Corinthians 14, let 2 or 3 prophesy, or speak in tongues, and let others, somebody else interpret. If there's no interpreter, he said, then speak silently to yourself and to God. So most people that I know with the gift of tongues exercise it primarily privately in their own personal prayer lives.
Indeed. Iva, thanks for the call. Alondra, this is going to be a good one, from Fontana, California is next. Hi, Alondra. Welcome to Pastor's Perspective. Hello, you there? Alondra, are you with us? I think she got stage fright here for a second. It says she's 12 years of age. We'll see if we can get her the courage to come back on again. All right, well, wait for Alondra to come back, but we want to talk to you about your question, Alondra. In fact, I'll read her question. It says, is Jesus the one who opens the gates of heaven? Maybe she was too shy to say it. Mm-hmm. Who opens the gates of heaven?
Well, Alondra, when I was a boy, that's what I was taught, that the gates of heaven had been locked because of man's sin, so nobody could get into heaven, basically.
Really?
Yeah, that was a Catholic way of describing, what Jesus did, that he opened the gates of heaven. And so in a sense, but there's some truth to that, in the sense that apart from Jesus, he said he's the door.
Right.
So I guess you could put gate.
In fact, you can translate the word as gate, too.
Can you?
Door, it can mean gate, actually, the sheep gate, because there's a gate more to the sheepfold.
Right, yeah. Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
So, so what he's saying there is that he is the one through which we can enter into heaven. Okay. We can only come into heaven through Jesus. He said he is the door. If someone tries to come in another way, in the context he was talking about false teachers there. But, so he's the door. He's the way to God. All right,
Alondra, thank you for the question. Appreciate that. Alondra, 12 years of age.
So, Don, I just got sent this text. Okay, so here it is. A scientific dissent from Darwinism. Here, we are skeptical of claims for the ability of random mutation and natural selection to account for the complexity of life. Careful examination of the evidence for Darwinian theory should be encouraged. So this is a list. There's 22 pages of names. Every one of them have PhDs. Yep. And so I'm just looking at the bottom here, University of Rochester, Weizmann Institute of Science, Israel, University of South Carolina, University of Ottawa, Canada. So, and this thing just goes on. It doesn't tell me how many names are on here, but I've got 22 pages of names. So.
In other words, you could have advanced degrees in particular areas of science and still believe the biblical account of creation. In fact, the more you know, the more you might question the Darwinian evolution theory.
Yeah. But it's political, isn't it? I mean, you risk your everything
you do.
To take a stand against this. I mean, it's just crazy. This kind of stuff is crazy.
It is. It's funny you say that, because the day after the Bill Nye, Ken Ham debate, we had Dr. Georgia Purdom on the show, and one of the things we laughed about is Bill Nye saying, the great thing about science, you can experiment, find new things, and you'll be accepted when you find these new discoveries. And I thought that's the funniest thing I ever heard, because when people find something against the grain, it's not politically correct. They're showing the door.
Absolutely. And even people that have discovered some of the most wonderful things initially were spurred and just rejected and mocked. And I remember reading the story of the doctor, I can't remember his name right now, a Jewish guy who discovered the importance of hand washing.
Ignaz Semmelweis
during surgeries.
Yeah. 19th century. In Vienna.
Mm-hmm. And he started insisting, all these women were dying after birth of their children, and none of the doctors washed their hands in those days.
So they didn't think they needed to.
So he came up with the idea that I think that these germs are being transported because nobody's washing, they mocked him.
Yeah,
they laughed him to scorn.
Exactly.
They thought he was an idiot.
Yep. They didn't know about sanitation at all. Yeah. Although the Bible did a couple thousand years earlier. Moses talked about washing and running water.
Yeah.
If you've touched a dead body, because what had happened was what the interns, they would do the autopsies, and they went straight from doing autopsies to delivering babies. Yeah. And,
exactly.
And he wondered if there could be some connection with that. Maybe they're bringing something over. And of course, now we know that.
And as a Jew, it was his reading of the scriptures that led him to consider that.
Yeah. How did the scriptures know that so far in advance, thousands of years before? Well, maybe God knew something that the people didn't know. Interesting one there. All right. Let's go now to Angus, Vildemar, California, next on Terrific Tuesday. Angus, welcome to the program.
Hi. Good afternoon, gentlemen.
Hi.
My question is, as Jesus is known as sitting on David's throne, and he came from the seed of woman,
right?
The question is just, how is he, part of David's genealogy if Joseph is part of David's genealogy and he came from the seed of the woman?
Okay, good. Well, a couple ways to answer that. Brian, go ahead.
Well, if you look in the Gospels, Matthew and Luke, Matthew has the genealogy of Jesus following Joseph. Joseph was the legal heir to the throne.
Indeed.
And then you have, in Luke's Gospel, you have a different genealogy, and I think most likely you have Mary's genealogy. And Mary was a descendant of David through Nathan. Joseph was a descendant of David through Solomon. Mary was a descendant of David through Nathan. And that's it. I had something else to say, but
you're talking about Jeconiah, the cursed line there.
No, I thought about that, but there was something else I was going to say.
You'll come up with it. One of those 25 million cells.
I'll think of it in a minute.
Okay. Yeah, the idea is that the son of David actually was a messianic title. David's greater son will be the Messiah. In 2 Samuel 7:12-19, David was promised one of his descendants would sit on the throne, and Jesus was a physical descendant of King David through Mary, but a legitimate heir to the throne through Joseph. So we got him from both way God did it, and the only way he could have been is a virgin conception, which what we see in the four Gospels.
Yeah, and Mary had to be related to David because the author of Hebrews says that we know that our Lord arose out of Judah, contrasting him with the priestly line, the Levites. So Mary was definitely, I think, Don, there is some dispute among scholars about the genealogy of Luke.
Of course,
that maybe it's not Mary's, but I think the most logical answer is it is Mary's. Jesus had.
Seems to be, yeah. Some people, there's about 4 different ways you can come up with the genealogies, whose was whose, but the bottom line is they had no problem with it in the first century, believing Jesus was virgin conceived and a descendant of King David. And that's why Matthew prints these public genealogies there, and so does Luke, takes us all the way back to Adam. All right, Carol from Anaheim, California's got a real interesting question. Hi, Carol. Thanks for waiting. You're on Pastor's Perspective.
Hi, Don. Hi, Brian.
Hi there.
Hi. I was wondering, first I want to ask, if I'm allowed, I was going to ask if I could make payments to go to the church planning thing, but I don't have a husband. And I believe I was a quality control inspector a long time ago, and I was asking the Lord, why am I here? He said, Carol, this is what you're going to do for me. You're going to go into cities, and you're going to put churches in certain places, and you're going to structure around them and go on. So I wanted to know, because the church planning is more a men's thing with Calvary Chapel, would I be able to go? Would I be able to make payments to be able to go? I'm not working right at this moment, but when you mentioned the church planning seminar Monday and Tuesday.
All right, well, excellent question. What about
Carol,
that?
This is something that we're hosting, but we're not actually the ones who are in charge of taking the sign-ups or the payments or making those decisions. This is the CCP or the CCP network, Church Planting Network, ccpnetwork.org would be the place to go. That's where you can sign up. Well, it's actually re-engage at give you the information that you're asking about.
Okay, reengage.org. All right, Carol, bless your heart. Belmont, California now, and Bonnie is with us next on Pastor's Perspective. Hi, Bonnie. Welcome to the program.
Hi.
Okay, that's Beaumont, not Belmont.
Oh, okay. It says Belmont here. Beaumont. Is that Beaumont, California, or Beaumont, Texas?
That's right. California.
Oh, Beaumont near Banning and Beaumont. Where
Right.
the wind's always
Absolutely.
blowing out there. All right, got it.
Yeah, Blowmont is what we call it.
Okay.
Okay, my question is the difference between the resurrection listed here.
Mm-hmm.
We know that in 1 Thessalonians chapter 4, it speaks of the dead in Christ will rise first,
Right.
and those who are alive remaining will be caught up together.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, then in Revelation chapter 20, verse 5, is talking about after the 1,000 years, the rest of the dead did not come to life
Right.
until the 1,000 years were ended. This is the first resurrection.
Right. So what's going on there? How can it be the first resurrection then if it already had happened? Is that okay, Brian?
Bonnie, the first resurrection seems to be in three phases. There's the resurrection of Jesus, and he's the first fruits of those who rise from the dead, Paul says in 1 Corinthians 15. And then you have the resurrection at the time of the rapture, when the Lord returns, and then you have the resurrection that you're reading about there in the book of Revelation. So it just seems it's all one resurrection, beginning with Jesus, and it culminates there in Revelation with that reference there.
Yeah, as Brian mentioned, 1 Corinthians 15:23, each in his own order, but Christ being the first fruits, each in his own turn. And there's the first resurrection is in stages. Now, Revelation 25 basically says this is the first resurrection. In other words, this pulls down the curtain on the first resurrection because there's another resurrection at the end of the millennium. But that resurrection is for the unbelievers. And that's why it says, blessed are those who take place in the first resurrection. So, Bonnie, it's in stages. And so Revelation chapter 20, verse 5 just says this pulls the curtain down on the first resurrection because 1 Corinthians 15:23 says each in his own order with Christ being the first fruits. All right.
Right, Don, I just got
more stuff.
Yeah, I just keep getting these great texts all day. No, I just got a text from Ryan Reese asking if we would mention, and we will be happy to mention, this Thursday night, we have they call it Shine, and it's, Ryan shares, and it's a time where, they're reaching out to kind of a bit of a different cultural group and so forth. But anyway, this Thursday night, their special guest, a testimony from one of the guys, these guys, they have the funny names. Fieldy is his band name, but Fieldy's the bass player for the band Korn.
Oh, okay.
And Brian Head Welch,
we know Head.
Yeah, so we know Head. So Fieldy's a believer also. So
really?
you got these two guys, the guitar player and the bass player in this band. And these guys are both solid Christians, and Fieldy's going to be here on Thursday night sharing his story. So if you're into that kind of music, if you're interested in that, if maybe you were a Korn fan at one time, or maybe you still are, come on out Thursday night to Calvary Chapel, Costa Mesa at 7 o'clock, and Fieldy will be here sharing a story. Now, I heard Brian give his testimony one time, and he told us how, because every guy in the band has one guy's Monkey and Fieldy and Head, and so he told us how everybody got their nicknames. I thought, this is just classic sort of band stuff. It was funny. But these guys, Don, I'll tell you, the Lord's using these guys in an amazing way. And at their concerts, these guys, Brian was out of Korn for 10 years, and then he went back in
He's
recently.
come back,
he's back in the band. And just felt like the Lord was leading him in. So they go do these, do these concerts for 60, 80,000, 100,000 people. And afterwards they have these after parties, so they invite everybody back for the party. And guess what they do? They preach the gospel.
Isn't that great?
They lead them to Christ.
Yep.
So there's some amazing stuff going on with these guys.
Great.
And it's, it's unconventional, it's unorthodox. Some people just think, oh, this is the worst thing I've ever heard. Sometimes I just think, Christians need to chill out a bit. I don't know.
Time.
Do you know who Lecrae is? Are you familiar with Lecrae?
Oh, yes.
Okay, Lecrae has the #1 record in the country right now.
Oh, really?
Yeah, #1, top of the Billboard charts. Wow. And it's his new album, Anomaly. The guy's a solid Christian brother.
He is indeed.
And, we need to support this guy. We need to pray for him. Indeed. He's in a place that's just, God's put him in a unique place, but he just gets so much flack from Christians.
That's
it's
terrible.
Like, no, you can't do that. That's not what Christians do. And, I think, listen, who are we to judge another man's servant?
Exactly.
God what are we supposed to do? Just stay huddled together in our little place that, we can't go out, we can't cross out the border. I read a quote from Lenny Kravitz today, and you know who Lenny Kravitz is, right? And Lenny said, "Look, I'm not of the world, but I'm in the world. I'm in I'm a rock and roller."
Yeah.
And he says, I need people to pray for me because God's got me here to do, to minister in an environment that there's not a lot of people ministering.
Nope.
So instead of criticizing these Christians that God has put in these places and he's using them, we should be praying for these guys.
Indeed.
We should be supporting them.
Yeah.
We should be encouraging them in their work and not tearing them down.
And thank God they are there, too, because they're reaching people that you and I could never reach, that would never tune into a program like this, never darken the door of a church, but they hear the gospel from these guys.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's wonderful. So if you go Thursday to hear Fieldy, and you're new to this, just to warn, he doesn't look like a typical churchgoer. Let's put it that way. Is that a fair statement?
Well, Don, I mean, look, what is a typical churchgoer for the past 40 years?
I know. I'm just
we
being
started
facetious.
looking different, didn't we?
We've been looking real different for 40 years. But if people get in their
you
mind,
and I still look kind of normal.
Somewhat.
We just look old.
Yeah, we're just old. We're not normal. We're just old. Okay, so Fieldy will be there Thursday night here at Calvary Chapel, Costa Mesa. Okay, that's great. Len from Texas has been waiting a long time. Len, thanks for your patience. You're on Pastor's Perspective. Hi.
Hi, I want to thank you guys for your program. I've been listening for a couple of years, and it's really a blessing. I tell my family and friends about it all the time. So
thank you. Appreciate that.
My question is, I wanted to get your advice on if I'm doing something wrong with how I'm praying. I'm 33, and for the past 5 years, I've been praying daily for God to make me ready for my husband or make my husband ready for me because I'm not married.
Mm-hmm.
And I would really, really, more than anything, I would like to be married and have children.
Sure.
And so I guess I'm not sure. I know that I've been taught ask, seek, knock, and have not because you ask not. So is there something more that
something you're missing? Sure. Okay. Brian, what would you tell Len?
Well, Len, I would say, continue to pray, but I think I would broaden your prayer a little bit. I'm sure that this isn't the only thing you pray about, but I would just pray more specifically for God's will, because God already knows exactly what He wants to do. He already knows the person that He's chosen for you. And I think, because sometimes we can just sort of get preoccupied with one thing, and it can just be the thing that's always sort of weighing on us. And, when is this going to happen? And it's better to just, put it in the Lord's hands. Just say, Lord, I want to be married. And so I'm just trusting that you're going to prepare me for the person when the time comes. I'm trusting you're going to bring the person into my life. And I'm just leaving it with you. Yeah. And I want to serve you. I want to follow you right now. You got a unique opportunity as a single woman to serve the Lord. When you get married, you'll have other responsibilities. There'll be great things, but you have some unique time right now. So take advantage of the time. And don't worry so much about it. Just say, Lord, I'm going to leave it in your hands, and He'll bring it to pass. He knows. He knows the desire of your heart. Delight yourself in the Lord, Psalm 34, and He will give you the desire of your heart.
Yeah, and it's a timing thing too, Len. God knows the end from the beginning. He knows what you need, who you need, the perfect timing. And we've seen so many times these things happen where the dots are connected when people think, well, it's, what's happening, Lord? Time's running out. But then the Lord just in His timing has the right people meet at the right time. But the point is, in the meantime, you do the work of the Lord. You do God's work, and look up one day, and maybe next you'll be the person He has for you. But your main desire should be the work of the Lord, and these things will be added unto you. Matthew 6:33, right, Brian?
Seek first the kingdom,
and then and
all
so
these things will be added.
Yeah, and then and He knows what's best for you. And again, there's that natural desire. We certainly understand that, but timing is the whole thing, and God's timing isn't always the same as ours. Haven't we found that out, Brian?
Well, Don, I have certainly found that out.
Well, I know you have. Yeah. So timing is you got to leave that in God's hands. And Len, bless your heart. He has the very best for you in every single thing in your life. You know that. You're convinced of that. He's showed that to you time and time again. But just wait on Him. Trust Him and seek His kingdom first. And as Jesus said, Matthew 6:33, I'd have that verse in front of me at all times. All these things will be added unto you. Well, boy, we're out of time, and some great questions still on the line. Good questions today, good calls and that. And Len, thanks for the call. We'll be praying for you, Len from Texas, and you understand our heart. There's many Lens out there, Brian, guys and gals, who just, want to know. And it's, again, it's something that's up to the Lord.
Yeah.
Yeah, we can't force something like that. All right, you'll be back on Terrific Thursday, right?
Yep.
Okay.
That'll be terrific.
Yeah, and tomorrow, Wild Wednesday, of course. Who's this guy? I can't remember who's on with me tomorrow. We'll see him when he comes in the studio. Anyway, for Pastor Brian, I'm Don Stewart saying thanks for listening. We'll see you again tomorrow, God willing, at 3 o'clock Pacific on another edition of Pastor's Perspective. Until then, may the Lord richly bless. Bye-bye.
We pray you've been blessed and that you'll join us again for another edition of Pastor's Perspective. The preceding was sponsored by Calvary Chapel and K-Wave.